Learn English through story with WooEnglish. The Price of Trust. From shells to silver, from paper to Bitcoin. This story takes you on a powerful journey through the history of money and the secret that makes it all work: trust. In this audiobook, you will discover how money, belief, and power shape our world, and why trust is more valuable than gold. It's not just a story. It's a lesson about human nature, economics, and the invisible promises that hold our lives together. Improve your English naturally as you listen, repeat, and feel every word. Simple sentences, clear rhythm, deep ideas. The WooEnglish way to learn and think in English. Listen, learn, and never forget. The true price of trust. Chapter 1. The First Trade. Long before banks, before coins, before paper and screens, there was only need. A farmer stood under the hot sun, holding a basket of rice. He was hungry, not for rice, but for fish. Near the river, a fisherman was pulling his net. He had plenty of fish, but no rice, so they smiled, met halfway, and made a deal. Rice for fish, fish for rice. Both happy, both federal. That was the first trade, simple, human, honest. But not every trade was easy. What if the fisherman didn't want rice today? What if he wanted shoes instead, or a new tool? The farmer would have to search, walk to another village, find a shoemaker, trade rice for shoes, then walk back to the fisherman. Too slow, too hard, too risky. And here, in this small problem, the story of money was born. People began to notice something. Trade worked only when there was trust. You had to believe that what you received had real value. So they started to look for something that everyone could agree on. Something that didn't spoil like food. Something small, rare, and beautiful. In warm islands, they chose cowrie shells. They were shiny, smooth, and hard to find. People wore them as necklaces. They gave them as gifts. And soon, they used them to buy things. In cold mountains, others used salt. In deserts, spices. In rivers, silver. Everywhere, people searched for a symbol. Not of power, but of trust. One day, an old trader sat beside his fire and said to his son, "Remember, boy, people don't trade things. They trade beliefs. A shell has no power. A silver coin has no soul. It's the trust behind it that feeds us." The boy didn't understand then. But one day, he would. Years passed. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. Markets grew loud with voices shouting, "Rice, salt, fish, silver." Everyone was trading something. But there was always the same question whispering through the noise. How do I know this has value? One afternoon, the same farmer, now old, stood in a busy market. He held a handful of shells. He wanted bread. The baker looked at the shells, smiled, and nodded. He believed in their worth. That small nod was the most powerful thing in the world, because that nod meant trust, and trust became the world's first invisible currency. From that moment, trade was never the same again. A fisherman could sell to a stranger. A farmer could buy from a city he'd never seen, because they both believed in the same story, the story of value. But behind that story, something greater was forming. A silent rule that would guide all money, all banks, and all empires to come. Money, in any form, is nothing more than a shared promise. A promise that people will keep believing, tomorrow and the day after. Without trust, no trade can live, no market can grow, no nation can rise. The first trade was not about rice or fish. It was about faith, faith in each other. And so, the question that began in that ancient market still echoes today. When you give something, when you take something, what are you really exchanging? Fish, rice, paper, coins? Or is it something far more precious? The silent, golden thread called trust. Chapter 2. The Power of Shells and Silver. The wind blew across the sand. A young traveler walked for days, carrying only a small leather bag. Inside, a few white shells. They were smooth, shiny. They caught the sun like pieces of the moon. To him, they were more precious than gold. He reached a village by the sea. There, people didn't ask for rice or tools. They asked, "How many shells do you have?" That was their language. That was their money. Everywhere he went, he saw the same idea taking root. In Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, people held small cowrie shells in their palms. They counted them, saved them. They trusted them. Why? Because shells were rare. You had to search deep in the ocean to find them. They didn't rot, they didn't break, and they were beautiful, small pieces of nature that never lost their shine. Slowly, the world began to understand a new truth. Beauty could hold value, and value could build trust. In another part of the world, under the hot desert sun, traders used silver. Silver was hard to find, heavy to carry, but easy to recognize. It didn't change color. It didn't disappear in time. A small piece of silver could buy a horse. A bigger one could buy a home. And just like that, a new kind of power was born. The power to measure everything. For the first time, people could count wealth. They could store it, move it, trade it. Silver, gold, shells, they were more than things. They were symbols. They stood for trust that traveled from one hand to another. But there was a problem. People began to cheat. They mixed silver with cheap metals. They painted stones to look like shells. Some wanted easy money without the work. And once again, trust began to shake. One old merchant looked at his fake coins and whispered, "When the lie enters the money, the trust leaves the world." He was right. Years later, great civilizations began to rise. Egypt, Greece, India, China. Each one built its own system of trade. Each one needed a way to make people believe. Kings began to stamp symbols onto pieces of metal. A lion, a sun, a name. It was a promise from the ruler himself. This is real. This is mine. You can trust it. And people did, because humans didn't just believe in gold anymore. They believed in power. A king's face on a coin meant safety. It meant protection. It meant order in a world of chaos. But deep inside, the lesson stayed the same. Money worked only when people agreed to believe. If one person lost faith, nothing changed. If everyone lost faith, everything collapsed. One night, our young traveler sat beside a fire with other traders. He opened his bag and poured the shells into the firelight. They sparkled. The men watched in silence. "Why do you still use shells?" one man asked. "They are old." "The world uses silver now." The traveler smiled. He let a shell roll between his fingers. "Because trust," he said softly, "is not in the silver. It's in the story we all tell together." The fire cracked. No one spoke. But in their hearts, they knew he was right. From that night on, the traveler became known as the man who carried the ocean. He reminded people that money, whatever form it takes, is just a mirror of human faith. The shells might fade, the silver might rust, but the story behind them, the story of trust that never dies. And so, as the world moved from shells to silver, from beauty to power, a quiet truth followed every coin and every trade. Money is not born from gold or stone. It is born from belief, because every coin whispers the same ancient words. Do you trust me? Chapter 3. Kings, Coins, and Control. The city walls were high. Drums beat through the streets. People waited in the square, eyes full of fear and hope. A man in gold armor stood before them, the new king. He raised his hand and spoke with a deep, powerful voice. "From today," he said, "only coins with my mark shall be used in my land." The crowd cheered. Trumpets echoed, and in that moment, money changed forever. Before the king's rule, traders used silver, shells, or stones. Each village had its own system. But now, there was one face, one promise, one control. The king's image was pressed into every coin. His crown meant power. His word meant trust. A coin became more than metal. It became law. The people believed him. When they held a coin with his face, they believed in its value. They believed that the king would protect their trade, their homes, their lives. And for a while, it worked. Markets grew, cities flourished, soldiers were paid, empires expanded. Money gave the king power, and power gave him money. But power always wants more. One night, the royal mint was busy. Workers melted gold and poured it into new shapes. But something had changed. The coins looked the same, yet they felt lighter. The king had ordered less gold in each one. He mixed in copper and bronze. Why? To create more coins, more money, more control. To him, it was clever. To the people, it was a silent betrayal. Weeks later, merchants began to notice. A baker held a coin and frowned. "It looks the same," he said, "but it buys less bread." Trust began to fade, slowly, like smoke in the wind. When people lose faith in the king's promise, the entire kingdom begins to shake. A wise old woman in the market whispered, "When gold loses its truth, power loses its soul." She was right. Across the seas, other rulers watched and learned. In Greece, kings minted coins with gods on them. In Rome, Emperors used their image to spread glory and fear. Every coin was a message, "Believe in me and I will give you order." But the message carried a hidden warning too. If you stop believing, the order disappears. Years later, when empires fell, their coins remained in the sand. Cold, useless, forgotten. Without the king, they were just pieces of metal. Without trust, they were nothing. One night, a young boy found an old coin in the dirt. He held it up to the moonlight and saw the face of a dead ruler. He smiled softly and said, "You had gold, armies, and power, but you could not keep trust." He closed his hand and walked away, from shells to silver, from kings to coins. The lesson stayed the same. Money has no heart. It borrows the heart of those who believe in it. And when belief breaks, the coin loses its shine, the crown loses its weight, and the world must find a new way to trust again, because the truth is simple. Every coin ever made carries two faces, one of metal and one of faith. Chapter 4. Paper Dreams. The year was far, far away. A quiet wind moved through the streets of ancient China. No gold, no silver, only soft sheets of paper, covered in strange black signs. A merchant held one in his hand. He stared at it and whispered, "How can this be worth a bag of rice?" The paper was light, thin, easy to tear. But behind it was a promise from the emperor himself. "This note is as strong as gold." And the people believed him. For a time, the dream worked. Before that, money was heavy. Traders carried bags of coins on their backs. Thieves waited on the roads. Travel was dangerous. Paper changed everything. Now, a single note could carry great value. It was magic. Words instead of metal, ink instead of gold. Merchants could travel farther. Markets could grow faster. And for the first time in history, trust was written, not minted. A banker in the city of Chengdu smiled as he gave out notes. He said to his customers, "Leave your coins with us. Take this paper. It's safer, lighter, faster." People nodded. They took the notes. They traded them. They used them to build homes, to buy silk, to cross oceans. The world had entered a new age, the age of paper dreams. But every dream has a danger. When money becomes paper, it also becomes easy to create. Too easy. One greedy ruler thought, if one note brings wealth, why not print more? He ordered his printers to work day and night. Stacks of notes filled the palace halls. The air smelled of ink and power. But soon, the people noticed something terrible. The more notes they had, the less each one was worth. Bread became expensive. Rice doubled in price. Families grew poor while rulers grew rich. The dream began to crack. One morning, a man entered a shop with a handful of notes. He asked for food. The shopkeeper shook his head. "Your paper means nothing," he said quietly. "Yesterday it bought a meal. Today, it can't buy even a crumb." The man looked at the notes in his hands. They felt empty now, like dust. And once again, trust was broken. When the emperor heard of the chaos, he shouted, "Punish the liars! Stop the printing!" But it was too late. Once trust escapes, it never comes back easily. People began to hide their gold again. They buried it in the ground. They whispered, "Paper lies. Only gold tells the truth." Yet, not everyone gave up. Centuries later, the idea of paper money returned, this time in Europe. Banks learned from China's mistakes. They promised to print only what they could back with real silver and gold. On each note, they wrote, "I promise to pay the bearer." Those words became sacred. They turned ink into power, paper into belief. A wise scholar once said, "Paper is fragile, but trust makes it stronger than iron." He was right, for every note, every bill, every currency ever born still carries that invisible truth. It is not the paper that gives it life. It is the faith behind it. As night fell over the city, a small boy watched his father count notes under a candlelight. "Father," he asked, "why do people believe in paper?" His father smiled and whispered, "Because people need to believe in something." The boy nodded slowly. He didn't understand yet, but one day he would. And so, from gold to paper, from weight to words, humanity learned a new kind of power. A power made not of metal or muscle, but of trust in a promise. Chapter 5. The Bankers of Florence. The city of Florence was alive with sound. Horses on cobblestones, bells from tall towers. The smell of bread, gold, and ink filled the narrow streets. It was the heart of the Renaissance, a time of art, power, and money. But not gold in the hands, not silver in the pockets. Something new was rising, the power of paper promises. In the corner of the market stood a small house with green shutters. Inside, a man sat behind a wooden desk. His name was Giovanni Medici. He wasn't a king, he wasn't a soldier, but his pen ruled the city more than any sword ever could. He wrote letters that changed lives. Each letter carried his seal. Each word carried trust. One morning, a merchant from Venice entered the room. He placed a bag of gold on the table. "Keep this safe," he said, "until I return." Giovanni nodded. He gave the merchant a piece of paper, a note with his mark. "This paper," he said, "is your gold. Show it in any of my houses, and you shall be paid." The merchant looked at it, surprised. "So, I can travel without carrying gold?" Giovanni smiled. "Yes, carry only my name. My name is safer than gold." And with that, banking was born. Soon, the name Medici traveled across Europe. From Florence to Paris, from London to Rome. Merchants no longer carried bags of coins. They carried letters of credit, words of trust written by men with ink and belief. A letter could cross mountains faster than a horse. It could move more gold than any caravan. And so, the world changed again. The Medici family became richer than kings. They funded artists, builders, explorers. They built cathedrals and crowned popes. All with money that didn't even exist yet. Only promises. But promises are fragile. They live only as long as people believe them. One day, A banker in another city copied their idea. He wrote his own notes. At first, people trusted him. Then, one winter morning, he failed to pay what he owed. Panic spread through the market like fire. People shouted, "Where is my gold? Give us our money back!" And the banker had none. Fear moved faster than trust. Within days, the city fell into chaos. Shops closed. Families fled. Giovanni watched from his window and whispered, "This is not about gold. This is about faith." He was right again. To save their family, the Medici made one rule: never break a promise. If a man comes for his gold, give it, even if it hurts, because once trust is broken, no letter, no coin, no crown can fix it. Years later, Giovanni's son, Cosimo, stood in the same room. He looked at his father's old desk and said, "Money is a river. It flows to those who are trusted to keep it clean." That became the family secret. Not gold, not silver, but reputation. The world learned something powerful that day: that the richest man is not the one with gold in his hands, but the one with trust in his name. Florence became the capital of finance. Its beauty was built not on marble, but on belief, and from those narrow streets, a quiet revolution began. A revolution of ideas, ink, and invisible wealth. As the bells rang over the Arno River, a young apprentice watched his master seal another letter. He asked softly, "Maestro, what gives this paper its value?" The banker smiled. "The same thing that gives value to a man," he said. "His word." And with that, the lesson of Florence was written in history. Gold fades. Empires fall. But trust, when guarded with honor, builds cities that never truly die. Chapter 6. Empires of Credit. The world was changing again. Ships crossed oceans. New lands appeared on maps. Gold and silver moved in every direction. But behind the ships, behind the kings and explorers, stood a quiet force: credit. A promise written on paper. A belief in tomorrow. A system built not on treasure, but on trust. In London, merchants gathered in small coffee houses. They talked about trade, risk, and dreams. One man said, "I don't have the money now, but I'll pay when my ships return." Another replied, "Fine. I'll give you the goods. I trust your word." And just like that, credit became the blood of business. Across the sea in Amsterdam, bankers kept tall books. Every page was filled with names, numbers, and promises. They didn't trade gold anymore. They traded confidence. If your name was good, you could buy anything. If your trust was strong, doors opened. If your reputation broke, everything collapsed. Governments saw this power and wanted it. They began to borrow too. Kings used credit to build ships, fight wars, and rule empires. Paper moved faster than armies. Promises traveled farther than swords. The world was now built on invisible money, a web of loans, notes, and hopes. In France, a clever man named John Law had an idea. He told the king, "Sire, gold is slow. Paper is fast. Let me create a system where money can grow." At first, it worked. Banks printed notes. People traded them with excitement. The streets of Paris glowed with new wealth. But one day, people began to whisper, "What if this paper is worth nothing?" The whispers grew louder. Crowds ran to the banks. They wanted their gold back. And when the banks could not give it, the dream collapsed overnight. Paris fell silent. The paper that once shone like silver turned to dust. John Law escaped the city in the dark, leaving behind a single truth. Credit is powerful, but it is fragile. It can build empires in the morning and destroy them by night. In America, hundreds of years later, the same story returned. Banks lent more than they had. People borrowed more than they could pay. They built homes, cities, futures, all on credit. And when belief broke again, the crash came. Markets fell. Lives changed. But somehow, every time trust was lost, humanity built it again. Why? Because we need it. Because without trust, there is no tomorrow. A banker once said to his apprentice, "Do not think of money as gold or paper. Think of it as a bridge. If people believe in it, they can cross to the future. If they stop believing, the bridge collapses beneath them." And so, nations rose and fell on the same idea. Rome, France, Britain, America, all built on credit. The invisible empire of belief. It was no longer about coins or kings. It was about systems, about people's confidence in those systems. Late one evening, a young trader sat by the River Thames. He held a note in his hand and said softly, "This paper is only as strong as the hand that signs it." He looked at the stars and whispered, "Trust is not printed. It is earned." From Florence to London, from gold to paper, humanity had built something new. An empire made not of stone or steel, but of credit and the faith that tomorrow's promise will still be paid. And that empire, like all the others, would face its test, because every empire built on belief must one day answer the same question. What happens when trust runs out? Chapter 7. The Broken Trust. The morning was quiet. Too quiet. A man in a gray suit stood before the bank's heavy doors. They were locked. Behind the glass, the lights were off. He looked down at the sign taped to the door. It said, "Closed. Temporarily." But everyone knew it was not temporary. It was the day trust broke. All around him, people were gathering. Old women, young fathers, children holding their parents' hands. Each one carried a small book, their savings account. They had worked for years, saved every coin, believed every promise. And now, in one terrible morning, it was all gone. The bank had no gold left. The loans had failed. The system had cracked. News spread like fire. In London, in New York, in Paris, markets fell, factories stopped. Men lost jobs, families lost homes. The world entered the Great Depression. Inside a dark office, a banker sat alone. He held a note between his fingers, the same kind he once gave to thousands of people. His hands trembled. His voice was low. "I built my life on numbers," he whispered. "But I forgot they stand for lives." On the streets, money meant nothing. People traded bread for milk, shoes for food, work for shelter. The dream of endless growth had turned to dust, and yet, in that silence, something deeper began to appear. A question that had followed humanity since the first trade. If money is built on belief, what happens when belief disappears? Governments rushed to fix it. New laws, new rules. They said, "Your money is safe again." They built systems, banks, and promises, all trying to rebuild the same fragile bridge. Trust. But the scars remained. People still remembered the cold hunger, the fear of waking up to nothing. One woman kept a secret under her floorboards. Every night she checked it, a small box filled with coins and gold. Her daughter asked, "Mama, why do you hide it?" The woman smiled sadly. Because paper can lie. Gold cannot. Years passed. New wars began. The world rebuilt itself again. But deep inside every nation, every heart, a small doubt remained. Can we ever truly trust money again? When the war ended, leaders met in a grand hall. They made a new system, a promise between nations. They said, "We will tie our currencies to gold. We will protect trust." And for a time, it worked. The world started to breathe again. Banks reopened. Factories roared. Hope returned. But trust. Trust is always a fragile guest. Years later, that golden promise broke again. Countries printed too much. The link to gold was cut. Money became just numbers, floating, changing, invisible. People stared at the new world and wondered, what is real now? An old man who had lived through it all sat by his window. He told his grandson, "When I was young, gold was real. Now money is only light on a screen. But remember, boy, it is not the gold that makes it real. It is the trust between people." The boy nodded slowly. He didn't understand then. But one day he would. Because the story of money has always been the story of us. It rises with our faith. It falls with our fear. And every time the world forgets that lesson, it learns it again. Through hunger, loss, and broken promises. The day trust broke was not the end of money. It was a reminder, a whisper from the past saying, "Without trust, gold is just metal, paper is just dust." Chapter 8. Digital Gold. The world had changed again. The sound of coins was gone. Paper bills were fading. People no longer carried money in their pockets. They carried it in their phones. Numbers on a screen. Light, not metal. Money had become invisible. It started with cards and banks. Then came PayPal, online shopping, and the idea of sending money with one click. It was fast. Easy. People began to say, "Why do we still need cash?" A new dream was being born. A dream of digital gold. In 2008, the world was tired. Banks had failed again. People had lost their homes, their jobs, their faith. Then, from the darkness of the internet, a strange name appeared. Satoshi Nakamoto. No one knew who he was. No photo, no face, only an idea. He wrote a message to the world. A system without banks, without kings, without lies. He called it Bitcoin. Bitcoin was not a coin. It was code. Digital numbers created by computers. No gold, no paper, only math. And behind that math was something old, something ancient. Trust without rulers. People didn't have to believe in banks anymore. They believed in technology, in transparency, in freedom. At first, everyone laughed. Money from the internet? That's impossible. But then, someone used it to buy pizza, and that simple act changed history. A few lines of code were exchanged for real food. For the first time ever, trust was written in ones and zeros. Years passed. Bitcoin grew. Other coins were born. Ethereum, Litecoin, and thousands more. Some were real innovations. Others were just illusions. But the idea remained powerful. What if we could build a world where money was free from control, where no one could print more, where people trusted the system, not the rulers? Governments became nervous. Banks grew afraid. They asked, if we cannot control money, what will we control? But the people kept believing, because once again, they wanted something the world had lost: trust. A young man in Tokyo watched the numbers on his computer rise and fall. He smiled and whispered, "This is not about money. It's about faith in the future." At the same time, an old banker in London shook his head. "People are fools," he said. "They trust machines more than men." But maybe that was the point. Maybe trust had moved from hands to code, from gold to light. The internet became the new marketplace. Your bank was an app. Your wallet was a password. Your value lived inside a cloud. And the question grew louder every year. Can we truly trust what we cannot see? One night, a power cut hit a city. Lights went out. Phones died. Screens went black. People looked around in silence. Without electricity, their money had vanished. That night, many understood something deep. Digital gold shines bright, but it depends on a world that never stops glowing. Technology had given birth to a new kind of belief. But belief, as always, is fragile. It lives in the heart, not in the code. The story of money had come full circle again. From shells to silver, from paper to pixels, always changing shape, but never changing its soul. Because whether it's gold or a number on a screen, the real value never lives in the thing itself. It lives in trust, the oldest, strongest currency of all. Chapter 9. The True Price of Trust. The world is faster now. Money moves at the speed of light. You can send it across oceans in a second, but lose it just as fast. We live surrounded by numbers, in apps, screens, and clouds. Yet behind every number, there's still the same fragile thing. Trust. A girl in Nairobi sells handmade jewelry online. A boy in Sao Paulo pays her instantly with his phone. They have never met. They don't speak the same language. But somehow, they trust each other. He trusts that her work is real. She trusts that his payment will arrive. That invisible bridge, that quiet agreement between two strangers, is older than any coin or code. It is the same bridge built thousands of years ago when a farmer traded rice for fish. Trust has carried humanity through every age. It built kingdoms. It started wars. It sent rockets to the sky. And every time we forgot its price, we paid it again with pain. In the modern world, we think we are clever. We have algorithms, contracts, and digital locks. But none of them mean anything if people stop believing. When you click buy, you trust that something will come. When you open your bank app, you trust that the numbers are real. When you look at a bill in your hand, you trust that others will accept it. Without that belief, every system collapses. One evening, a teacher asked his students, "What is the most valuable thing in the world?" They shouted, "Gold, oil, Bitcoin, knowledge." The teacher smiled. He drew a small circle on the board and wrote one word inside, trust. He said softly, "Without trust, gold is useless. Without trust, knowledge becomes fear. Without trust, even love disappears." The room fell silent. History had taught this lesson again and again. When the world lost faith in kings, empires fell. When it lost faith in banks, economies crashed. And when people lose faith in each other, the world grows cold. But trust always finds a way to return. Like spring after winter. Like light after darkness. Because trust begins in small things. A handshake, a promise, a shared story. It grows when people keep their word. It dies when they don't. One man once said, "Money is only a mirror. It shows us what we truly believe." And maybe he was right. Every coin, every note, every digital number is just a reflection of us dash dash. Our honesty, our hope, our fear. Now, when you look at your wallet, your card, your phone, remember what you are really holding. Not paper, not metal, not pixels, but trust. The most precious treasure humanity has ever created. And somewhere, far away, in a small market by the sea, a farmer and a fisherman still trade. They look into each other's eyes. No banks, no codes, no kings, just one promise, one belief, one silent question that still rules the world. Do you trust me? Listen, repeat, and learn English through stories that stay in your mind.